I've lived in this quaint, peaceful village in India for as long as I can remember. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, where the neighbors greet each other with warm smiles and a friendly namaste. Life here was simple and uneventful, and I cherished the tranquility of our tight-knit community. One chilly evening, with the sky painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon, I decided to indulge in a rare treat. I craved a pizza from the nearest town, a guilty pleasure I rarely allowed myself. After a quick online search, I found a nearby pizzeria and placed an order for my favorite, a margherita pizza with extra cheese. The estimated delivery time was 45 minutes, so I settled in on my cozy couch, the soft glow of the TV illuminating the room. The minutes ticked away, and I was soon lost in the world of a crime thriller, my heart racing as the tension on the screen mounted. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, jolting me from my reverie. I checked the time, surprised that the pizza had arrived so quickly. My stomach growled in anticipation as I made my way to the door. I swung it open, expecting to see the familiar face of the pizza delivery driver. But the man who stood on my doorstep sent a shiver down my spine. He was tall, with disheveled hair and a scruffy beard that obscured most of his face. His eyes, however, gleamed with an unsettling intensity. He thrust the pizza box toward me without a word, his gaze never leaving mine. I hesitated, feeling a sense of unease wash over me. Something about this man didn't sit right, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I took the pizza box, and as I handed over the payment, I noticed a strange device attached to his delivery bag. It looked like a small electronic device with wires and blinking lights. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to the contraption. The man's lips curled into a chilling smile, revealing yellowed, crooked teeth. "Oh, just a little something to make sure you enjoy your meal, ma'am," he replied, his voice dripping with an eerie sweetness. Unease gnawed at my gut as I closed the door, the man's unsettling gaze lingering in my thoughts. I decided to dismiss it as an overactive imagination and carried the pizza to my dining table. My appetite had waned, but I forced myself to take a bite. The pizza tasted fine, but the sense of dread lingered. As I took another bite, my phone buzzed with a new message notification. I reached for it, my heart racing. The message was from an unknown number, and the words sent a chill down my spine. "Enjoying your pizza, dear?" I dropped my slice of pizza, my hands trembling. Who could this be? Was it some sick prank? I typed out a response, my fingers fumbling on the keys. "Who is this? What do you want?" The reply came almost immediately, and it made my blood run cold. "I'm just here to make sure you have a memorable meal. Bon appetit." I stared at the message in horror, my mind racing with fear and confusion. This couldn't be happening in our peaceful village. I decided to call the police, but as I reached for my phone, another message popped up. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm watching, you know." My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced around my small living room, searching for any signs of intrusion. Nothing seemed out of place, but the sense of being watched was suffocating. I decided to play along, to keep this person engaged while I figured out what to do. "What do you want?" I typed, my fingers trembling. The reply came swiftly, and it sent a chill down my spine. "I want to see you scream." A wave of panic washed over me, and I realized that I needed help immediately. I dialed 911, the emergency number in India, and my voice quivered as I explained the terrifying situation to the operator. They assured me that the police would be dispatched immediately. I sat there, clutching my phone, my eyes darting around the room as I waited for the police to arrive. Minutes felt like hours as I received more sinister messages. "Are you scared yet? Tick-tock, tick-tock." The seconds crawled by, and I could hardly breathe. Then, I heard the sirens approaching, a welcome sound that filled me with a sense of relief. The police had arrived. I rushed to the door, flinging it open to see two officers in uniform standing on my doorstep. I explained everything, showed them the disturbing messages, and told them about the strange device I had seen on the delivery driver. The officers nodded gravely, and one of them said, "We'll take care of this, ma'am. You're safe now." They assured me that they would track down the pizza delivery driver and investigate the matter thoroughly. I felt a glimmer of hope that this nightmare would soon be over. Days turned into weeks, and I received no more messages from the sinister stranger. I began to let my guard down, believing that the police had successfully apprehended the person responsible. Life in our peaceful village resumed its normal rhythm, and I breathed a sigh of relief. But then, one fateful night, as I lay in bed, I heard a soft tapping against my window. At first, I thought it was the wind or a tree branch. But the tapping continued, persistent and rhythmic. I rose from my bed, my heart pounding, and approached the window cautiously. As I peered outside, I saw something that sent icy tendrils of fear creeping through my veins. A small stone, no larger than a pebble, had been thrown at my window. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at it, my mind racing. Who could be outside my window at this hour, and why were they throwing stones? Then, as if in answer to my unspoken questions, my phone buzzed with a new message. "Did you miss me?" My heart hammered in my chest as I glanced at the message. It was from the same unknown number that had tormented me before. Fear clenched at my insides as I realized that this nightmare was far from over. I quickly dialed 100, calling the police once again. This time, I could hear the urgency in my own voice as I explained the situation. The officers arrived swiftly, searching the area around my house, but they found no one. They assured me that they would increase patrols in the area and do everything in their power to catch the perpetrator. I thanked them, but deep down, I knew that this sinister game was far from over. As days turned into weeks, the messages continued, growing more sinister and threatening with each passing day. The unknown tormentor seemed to revel in my fear, taunting me with messages like, "I see you, even when you sleep. You can't hide from me." My life had become a living nightmare, and I lived in constant fear of the next message, the next stone thrown at my window, the next eerie visitation in the dead of night. I installed security cameras around my house, hoping to catch a glimpse of the person responsible, but they remained elusive. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and every moment felt like an eternity of dread. One evening, as I sat on my porch, my eyes swollen from sleepless nights, a chilling message appeared on my phone. "Tonight, it ends." I felt a cold dread wash over me, and I knew that I couldn't face this nightmare alone any longer. I called the police once again, my voice trembling as I recounted the latest threat. They assured me that they were doing everything in their power to track down the person responsible, but their words offered little comfort. That night, I locked every door and window, my heart racing with fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I lay in bed, clutching my phone, waiting for the inevitable. And then it came, a sound so chilling that it sent a jolt of terror through my entire being, a soft, eerie whispering just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, my eyes wide with terror, as the voice whispered my name. "Are you ready to scream, my dear?" A scream caught in my throat as the door slowly creaked open, revealing the shadowy figure of a man. He stepped into the room, his eyes gleaming with madness, and in his hand, he held a bottle of acid. I recoiled in horror, my heart pounding as he advanced toward me, his intentions unmistakably clear. I had to fight back, to save myself from this monstrous intruder. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I lunged at him, knocking the bottle from his hand. It crashed to the floor, the acrid smell of acid filling the air. We wrestled on the floor, a desperate struggle for survival. In the chaos, I managed to grab my phone and dial 101 last time. The operator heard my screams and dispatched the police immediately. The intruder was overpowering, his grip like a vice around my throat, but I fought with everything I had. The police arrived just in time, bursting into the room and pulling the intruder away from me. He struggled against their grasp, his eyes filled with madness and rage. As they dragged him away in handcuffs, I watched him with a mixture of fear and relief. It was over, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain forever. It was revealed that the man was a deranged stalker who had become obsessed with me after his brief encounter as the pizza delivery driver. He had stolen my personal information and had been tormenting me ever since. He had indeed intended to harm me that night, to fulfill his twisted desires and make me scream in terror. The bottle of acid he had brought with him was a horrifying testament to his intentions. The man was arrested, and justice was served. He was sentenced to 2 years in jail, a punishment that seemed far too lenient for the terror he had inflicted upon me. But even as I breathed a sigh of relief, I couldn't escape the nagging fear that someday, somehow, he would seek revenge. I lived in constant dread, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering when he would come back to haunt me. I knew that I had to be prepared, to protect myself at all costs, or else I would forever be a prisoner of the darkness that had invaded my life. The village I had once called home now felt like a haunting nightmare, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my ordeal was far from over. It's been a few months since that night, the night I wish I could forget but can't. Every time I close my eyes, the images, the fear, and the unsettling events come rushing back. It started on a cold, gloomy evening, just as twilight was giving way to the shroud of darkness. I was working my usual shift as a pizza delivery boy for the local joint, Tony's Pizzeria. The money was pitiful, but it was a temporary gig to earn some bucks before college started up again in the spring. Friday nights were the busiest, and this one was no exception. The pizza shop closed at midnight, and deliveries ceased at 11:30 so the drivers could help with the closing routine. That night, however, fate had a different plan for me. Around 11:45 p.m., the phone rang, breaking the rhythmic sounds of pizza boxes being folded. My boss, Tony himself, was about to decline the order as we had a strict policy not to deliver after 11:30. But the caller had ordered 8 large pizzas and insisted that someone drop them off at their house, which was a considerable distance from the shop. Tony, ever the penny pincher, couldn't resist the thought of the money those pizzas represented. He assigned me the delivery, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I typed the address into my phone's GPS and stared at the screen, revealing a daunting 30-minute drive to this far-off, unknown location. With 8 large pizzas in tow, I would probably arrive around 1 in the morning. Irritation simmered beneath the surface, but I tried to console myself with the prospect of a hefty tip due to the lateness of the hour, the number of pizzas, and the distance. The pizzas took an excruciating 35 minutes to bake, and with them finally ready, I loaded them into my car and set off toward my destination. The clock was relentless, and as predicted, it was close to 1 in the morning when I reached the address. I parked my car at the foot of a steep, winding driveway that led to an imposing, isolated mansion. I sat in my car for a moment, surveying my surroundings. The house was grand, no doubt about it, but the front yard was in shambles. We didn't get much snow in these parts, so the grass should have been kept in check, yet it looked like it hadn't seen a lawnmower for ages. That was my first unsettling observation. The second was that the house stood isolated, perched on a hill in the middle of nowhere. There were no other houses nearby, no cars in the driveway, and not a single light shone from within. The thought nagged at me, who orders 8 large pizzas for delivery to a dark, deserted mansion? Reluctantly, I stepped out of my car, my breath forming puffs of fog in the chilly night air. As I walked up the cracked, weed-ridden sidewalk toward the front door, I couldn't help but notice that the grass was even higher than I initially thought. Neglected for months, it now reached past my knees, engulfing the entire yard. I was about to ring the doorbell when my eyes caught a piece of paper taped to the door, fluttering softly in the breeze. My curiosity battled my apprehension as I read the note. Dear Pizza Boy, please come in. Do not ring the doorbell. Thank you. The sinister elements of this whole situation crept under my skin, but I ignored the note's warning and rang the doorbell. I waited for what felt like an eternity, but no one answered. I knocked on the door, then pressed my ear against the wood, straining to catch any sound from inside. Nothing. I stood there, alone on a stranger's porch in the dead of night, 8 pizzas in hand, with uncertainty gnawing at me. Leaning toward the door handle, I was about to enter when a chilling memory struck me. Just a couple of weeks earlier, a young boy named Tommy had been abducted in broad daylight not 3 miles from this very spot. We didn't live in a dangerous neighborhood, and such events were unheard of. My hand withdrew from the door handle, and a wave of caution washed over me. I couldn't afford to be abducted, I had to live to deliver those pizzas. Despite my fear, I rang the doorbell again, this time defiantly. Minutes passed with no response. I was about to give up and return to my car when a voice from inside the house shattered the eerie silence. Come in. The voice was unmistakably a woman's, yet it seemed distant, as if coming from the farthest corner of the house. I went back to the door, knocking loudly this time. Come in, please. I'm upstairs, the woman's voice called again, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Her voice had a peculiar quality, a subtle wrongness that I hadn't noticed outside. It sounded like a man attempting to mimic a woman's voice. Alarm bells rang loudly in my head, but I battled the paranoia and hesitantly pushed the door open. The interior of the house mirrored the yard's neglect. Piles of refuse littered the rooms, cobwebs draped across furniture, and an oppressive air of abandonment hung in the stale air. Only a few lights were on, one in the room I stood in and another at the top of a grand staircase to my right. I strained to listen as the woman's voice echoed from upstairs, I'll be down in a minute. The voice still didn't feel right, and my skepticism deepened. She claimed to be alone, yet 8 large pizzas had been ordered. A small, nagging feeling clawed at the back of my mind. Carefully, I approached a table a few feet away and set the pizzas down. The table was littered with unopened mail, spilling onto the floor. The silence in the house weighed on me as I considered my options. Panic bubbled up, and I glanced back at the door, contemplating a hasty retreat. That's when I saw it. A piece of shadow darted across the yard, disappearing into the tall, unkempt grass. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. The darkness outside obscured the details, but there was something utterly unnatural about the figure. Its head was disproportionately small, no larger than a baby's, while its body seemed full-grown. What was most unsettling, though, was the thick, short tail that swayed behind it, like a predator stalking its prey. I couldn't see its eyes, but I felt them on me, and fear clamped down like a vice. I backed up, closing the door and locking it firmly, my heart pounding. The realization that I was trapped inside with the man upstairs pretending to be a woman sent a chill down my spine. I reached for my pocket, fumbling for my phone to call for help, but it wasn't there. Panic surged as I remembered leaving it in my car. Trapped and defenseless, I strained my ears for any sign of the woman's approach. In the darkness, I heard heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway, steady and confident, as if the intruder knew I was cornered. I needed an escape route. The stairs led up to the man, but I had no desire to meet him face to face. So, I turned and sprinted down a long, dimly lit hallway, my senses heightened to avoid tripping over debris scattered on the floor. The house's eerie silence was broken only by the occasional creak or groan. I reached the end of the hallway with one final door ahead of me. My trembling hand twisted the handle, and it grudgingly gave way with a high-pitched screech that pierced the quiet. I stepped into the room, my heart pounding, and immediately shut the door behind me. The room was dimly lit, the feeble glow revealing several candles arranged haphazardly on the floor, their wax pooling around them in irregular shapes. A gruesome sight met my eyes, an intricate pentagram etched in the floor, seemingly drawn in blood. The pungent metallic scent assailed my senses, causing my nose to tingle and my eyes to water. In the center of the pentagram, a chair sat with something, intestines, perhaps, resting on it, spilling blood across the floor. A macabre tableau that sent shivers down my spine. From behind the door, I could hear the intruder's footsteps drawing closer, the heavy thuds growing louder. He was near, and I had no means of escape. Driven by fear, I scanned the room for an alternative exit, my eyes settling on a window at the back of the room, untouched by boards. A glimmer of hope flickered as I sprinted toward it, my adrenaline surging. With a crash, I flung myself against the window, shards of glass biting into my flesh as I shattered it. Pain lanced through my body, but I barely registered it as I tumbled through the opening and onto the ground outside. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, before stumbling to my feet. My car was within sight, and without a second thought, I lunged toward it, the tall grass brushing against my legs as I raced to safety. Glancing back only once, I saw no one pursuing me. The front door of the house, the one I had locked, now stood wide open. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, which I'd wisely grabbed from the car before escaping. I called the police, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush, and requested medical attention for my wounds. The operator assured me that help was on its way, and soon enough, I heard the distant wail of police sirens. After the police arrived, my memories became a blur. I couldn't recall if I'd passed out or simply blocked everything out, but what followed were disjointed fragments: the ambulance ride, paramedics fighting to stem my bleeding wounds, and police officers questioning me in the sterile confines of a hospital room. The story that unfolded in the wake of that night was more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. The house belonged to an affluent elderly couple who had moved to Florida, using it as a summer retreat. They'd given the house to their grandson, Stanley Wordle, who had been living there alone for years. Shockingly, his family had lost contact with him over a year ago, deeming him the black sheep of the family. When Stanley was arrested, he admitted to killing 3 people, including the missing boy, Tommy, and a visiting couple. However, during his trial, he stunned everyone by claiming that he wasn't the real murderer. He refused to reveal the true culprit's identity, even when offered a shorter sentence. When asked about the motive, he laughed, saying that it was hungry. The judge, thinking it a desperate ploy to confuse the jury, sentenced Stanley to 3 consecutive life sentences with no chance of parole. The town's collective relief was palpable as the horrifying ordeal seemed to come to an end. But it was only the beginning. 3 weeks after Stanley's trial, chaos returned with a vengeance. Stanley Wordle was found dead in his prison cell, having gruesomely slit his own throat with a jagged piece of metal. As if his death weren't unsettling enough, rumors began to circulate that he had written something on the walls in his own blood just before dying. The words reportedly read, "It will rise again," accompanied by a crude drawing of an unidentifiable creature. I scoured the news for details, searching for any description of the monstrous figure I had seen in that yard. However, no such information emerged, and the police dismissed my account as a product of shock, but I knew deep down that what I had witnessed was real, and it haunted my nightmares. Sleep eluded me, replaced by restless nights filled with chilling visions. I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent lurked in the shadows, something linked to that enigmatic it mentioned by Stanley. The fear that gripped me was no ordinary fear, it was a primal, unrelenting dread. And now, as I sit here recounting these events, I can't escape the feeling that the nightmare isn't over. That whatever was unleashed that night is lurking, waiting, biding its time to rise again. The darkness encroaches, and I'm left with unanswered questions and a lingering sense of foreboding that chills me to the bone. I remember that fateful night all too well. It was a chilly autumn evening, the kind that sends shivers down your spine, and I was out on a routine pizza delivery. I had been a pizza delivery guy for years, and it was a job that never seemed to get old. Until that night, that is. I parked my beat-up old car in front of the address on the order slip, a decrepit-looking house that seemed to have been forgotten by time itself. The paint was peeling, the windows were cracked, and the porch creaked ominously as I ascended the steps. My gut churned with unease, but I brushed it off as pre-delivery nerves. I knocked on the door, and immediately, I heard a voice from deep within the house, far away and faint, yelling, "Coming." I waited patiently, shifting my weight from one foot to the other. But as the minutes ticked by, the voice drew closer, and each time it echoed down the hallway, it sent a chill down my spine. "Almost there, just wait." The voice called again, now noticeably closer. My unease grew, and I couldn't help but wonder what was taking so long. I glanced at my wristwatch, the seconds dragging on like hours. This eerie game of hide and seek continued for what felt like an eternity, with the voice drawing nearer and nearer, echoing through the dimly lit hallway. Finally, the person on the other side of the door reached it and swung it open. I expected to see someone standing at eye level, but instead, I was greeted by a sight that will haunt my nightmares forever. A man, or what used to be a man, sat on the floor, a grotesque smile plastered across his face. He had no legs, instead, he was reduced to a torso and arms, which he used to drag himself across the floor. The sheer horror of the sight before me paralyzed me for a moment, and I fought back the urge to vomit. I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of pity for this unfortunate soul. With great effort, he extended a hand toward me and said, "Hey there, buddy. Thanks for waiting. I'm really hungry. Would you mind putting the pizza in the kitchen for me?" I nodded, still unable to speak, and slowly made my way into the dimly lit house. The smell inside was musty and oppressive, a nauseating blend of decay and something far worse. I pushed my way past piles of clutter and filth, following the man's directions to the kitchen. I placed the pizza box on the counter, desperately wanting to escape this nightmare. The man, however, seemed genuinely thrilled that I had come to his aid. He was grinning from ear to ear as he rolled closer to me, his arms reaching out for the box. "Thanks so much, friend," he said. "You don't know how hungry I am." With a forced smile, I turned to leave the kitchen. But as I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Why had this man taken so long to answer the door? And how was he moving so quickly now? I stepped out of the kitchen, and to my horror, I found him right behind me, moving at a speed that defied logic. I tried to sidestep him, but he blocked my path effortlessly, his smile now tinged with malice. Panic welled up inside me as I realized I was trapped. With a burst of adrenaline, I leapt over him, attempting to clear the grotesque obstacle that stood between me and the door. But before I could land safely on the other side, he struck with shocking speed, sinking his teeth into my leg. The pain was excruciating, like 1,000 needles piercing my flesh all at once. I screamed in agony and stumbled to the floor. Blood poured from the wound, staining the dirty carpet beneath me. I had to get out of there. I couldn't let this monster finish me off. Summoning every ounce of strength, I crawled toward the front door. My vision blurred with tears of pain, and my heart raced like a jackhammer. The man with no legs pursued me, rolling with eerie swiftness, his teeth bared like a rabid animal. I reached the door and fumbled for the handle, my trembling hands slick with blood. With a desperate tug, I swung the door open and tumbled out onto the porch. My head spun as I gasped for air, the cold night wind biting at my wounds. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, my voice shaking as I recounted the horrifying ordeal I had just endured. But as I held the phone to my ear, there was only silence on the other end. No dispatcher's voice, no comforting words, just an eerie void. Frantic, I looked at my phone screen. No reception. My heart sank as I realized that I was truly on my own. I had to get to a hospital, and fast. Ignoring the searing pain in my leg and the throbbing in my nose where the man had bitten me, I forced myself to my feet. The decrepit house loomed behind me, and I knew I couldn't go back there, not for anything in the world. I staggered down the darkened street, each step sending fresh waves of pain through my battered body. The night seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing deeper and more menacing with every passing moment. As I stumbled onward, I couldn't help but wonder about the man with no legs. How had he moved so quickly? What had possessed him to attack me? And what was lurking in that house of horrors? I may never have the answers to those questions, but one thing is for certain. I will never forget that night, the night I delivered a pizza to a house that time had forgotten, and came face to face with a nightmare beyond my darkest fears. The pain in my leg was excruciating, and each step sent a jolt of agony through my body. I knew I had to find help, but I had no idea where I was or how far I had to go to reach the nearest hospital. As I limped through the desolate streets, the darkness seemed to press in on me from all sides. The only sounds were the distant hoot of an owl and the occasional rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze. It was as if the whole world had fallen silent, as if it were holding its breath. I tried my phone again, hoping for a signal, but it remained stubbornly dead. I felt a growing sense of dread, as if something malevolent lurked in the shadows, watching and waiting. Suddenly, I heard a low, guttural growl behind me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, I turned to see a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring at me from the darkness. They belonged to a massive, hulking figure, hidden in the shadows. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was too large to be human, and its eyes seemed to radiate an unnatural, otherworldly light. Before I could react, it lunged at me with lightning speed. I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding its grasp. My injured leg screamed in protest, but adrenaline fueled my desperate flight. I ran as fast as I could, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The creature pursued me relentlessly, its heavy footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. I could see a faint glimmer of light up ahead, the promise of safety. It was a small convenience store, its neon sign flickering in the darkness like a beacon. I pushed myself harder, pain and fear driving me forward. As I reached the store, I flung myself through the door, gasping for breath. The creature skidded to a halt just outside, unable or unwilling to enter the sanctity of the well-lit store. Its yellow eyes stared at me malevolently before it turned and vanished into the night. The store clerk, an elderly man with a kindly face, rushed to my side. He called 911, and within minutes, an ambulance arrived to take me to the hospital. I was treated for my leg wound and questioned by the police about the bizarre encounter in front of the convenience store. I tried to explain what had happened at the decrepit house, about the man with no legs and the creature that had pursued me, but my story sounded like the ramblings of a madman. The police promised to investigate, but I could tell they didn't take my account seriously. Days turned into weeks as I recovered from my injuries. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the creature from that night was still out there, lurking in the shadows. I became obsessed with uncovering the truth, with finding out what had happened at that house and what had become of the man with no legs. I started by researching the history of the house, and what I discovered sent a shiver down my spine. The house had once belonged to a reclusive scientist named Ezekiel Blackwood, known for his controversial experiments in the field of human augmentation. His work had been shrouded in secrecy, and he had disappeared under mysterious circumstances years ago. I delved deeper into Dr. Blackwood's research, uncovering reports of failed experiments and ethical violations. It seemed that he had been experimenting on humans, attempting to merge them with machines to create a new form of life. The man with no legs must have been one of his unfortunate subjects. But what about the creature that had pursued me? I couldn't find any mention of such a thing in Dr. Blackwood's research. It was as if it had come from some otherworldly realm, summoned by the mad scientist's dark experiments. As I continued my investigation, I received a series of anonymous messages, each one more chilling than the last. They warned me to stop digging into Dr. Blackwood's work, to leave the past buried. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was getting closer to the truth, that I was on the verge of uncovering something unspeakable. One night, as I pored over Dr. Blackwood's notes and journals, I found a reference to a hidden laboratory beneath the house. It was a secret, subterranean lair where the most heinous of experiments had taken place. I knew I had to go there, to confront the horrors that lay hidden in the depths. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of dread, I returned to the decrepit house. The front door stood ajar, as if inviting me inside. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and I could hear faint whispers echoing through the darkened halls. I descended into the basement, my heart pounding in my chest. The beam of my flashlight revealed a nightmarish scene. Cages lined the walls, each one containing a twisted, grotesque creature that defied description. Some were human, or at least they had once been, their bodies merged with mechanical parts in a grotesque fusion of man and machine. In the center of the room, I found a table covered in surgical instruments and blood-stained documents. It was here that Dr. Blackwood had conducted his vile experiments, tearing apart the boundaries between life and death, between man and monster. As I explored further, I came upon a hidden chamber, its door sealed with heavy chains. With a sense of trepidation, I broke the chains and entered the room. What I found inside will haunt me forever. There, suspended in a tank filled with a viscous, glowing fluid, was the source of my nightmares. It was a creature of pure horror, a nightmarish fusion of man and machine, its limbs twisted and contorted, its eyes filled with malevolent intelligence. It was the very embodiment of Dr. Blackwood's darkest ambitions, a living abomination that should never have existed. The creature's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a chilling presence in my mind, as if it were probing my thoughts, my fears. It spoke to me, not in words, but in a telepathic whisper that echoed in the depths of my consciousness. "You have uncovered the truth," it said, its voice a cold, mechanical rasp. "You have seen what cannot be unseen. Now, you must bear witness to the consequences of meddling in forces beyond your understanding." With that, the creature unleashed a wave of psychic energy that sent me reeling. I fell to the floor, my mind consumed by a nightmarish vision of a world plunged into chaos and despair. It was a future of horrors beyond imagination, a world ruled by the abominations created by Dr. Blackwood's mad experiments. When I awoke, I was back in my own time, my body battered and bruised, my mind scarred by the horrors I had witnessed. I knew that I could never reveal the truth of what I had seen, for the world was not ready to face the consequences of Dr. Blackwood's dark experiments. I live now in constant fear, haunted by the memories of that night and the knowledge of the unspeakable horrors that lurk in the shadows. I can only hope that someday, someone will uncover the truth and put an end to the abominations that Dr. Blackwood unleashed upon the world. But until then, I am a prisoner of my own nightmares, forever haunted by the chilling words of the creature I encountered in the hidden laboratory beneath the decrepit house. Beware the darkness, for within it lies the true horror of the human soul. It was a sweltering summer night, the kind that makes the air feel thick and heavy, like you're breathing through a wet wool blanket. I'd been out delivering pizzas for hours, and the relentless heat was taking its toll. The relentless pace of orders left me with no time for a bathroom break, and I had been guzzling water to stay hydrated. My bladder was screaming for relief as I navigated the dark streets of the quiet suburban neighborhood. The delivery was for a customer in a house I'd been to before, a quaint little place tucked away on the edge of town. The house had a certain eerie charm, especially at night when the streetlights cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn. As I pulled up to the address, a sense of unease washed over me. The house was shrouded in darkness, not a single light seeping through the curtains. There was an eerie stillness about the place, a silence that seemed to swallow up the neighborhood. I checked the time on my phone. It was close to 9:30 p.m., and most folks were either winding down for the night or glued to their TVs. But this place, it felt different. I reached for the delivery slip and dialed the customer's number, the phone ringing in my ear as I gazed at the foreboding house. A voice on the other end answered, breathless and somewhat disoriented. "Yeah?" it said. My patience had worn thin from the relentless rush of deliveries and my dire need for a restroom break. I snapped, "Hey, it's your pizza out front, but there doesn't appear to be anybody home." The voice on the other end, now sounding more composed, replied, "Yeah, I'm not home." Exasperated, I fired back, "Well, then we're going to have to terminate the order because I've arrived in the stated delivery window, and you were supposed to pay in cash. So, I don't know what to tell you. Plan ahead next time." But just as I was about to hang up in frustration, the voice on the other end quivered, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I was running down the street, so I could barely hear you. I just switched you out of my AirPods. Is that better? Sorry, I completely lost track of time at work, but I knew you were coming. That's why I'm literally running home right now. Please don't leave, I'm starving, and I don't have a car. Seriously, please don't leave. 5 minutes tops, okay?" Regret washed over me like a tidal wave. I had been so quick to anger, not realizing the situation on her end. I knew what it felt like to be hungry, stranded without a vehicle, and running late. I sighed, my frustration giving way to empathy. No, my bad," I mumbled. "I'm letting the heat get to me, and it's not your fault. No need to rush. See you when you get here." As I hung up, I couldn't help but remember her. I had delivered to this house a few times before, and she had always been a pleasant customer. I felt guilty for my earlier outburst. Now, however, my immediate concern was my bursting bladder. The heat wave had forced me to consume more water than usual, and it was catching up with me. I had to find a spot to relieve myself, and fast. The area around her house was densely populated, with no discreet hiding spots in sight. I had just tossed my empty water bottle after the last delivery, a foolish move in hindsight. My desperation grew, and I finally decided that I had no choice but to find a secluded place near her house. After all, it was late, the streetlight closest to her door was out, and the surrounding houses seemed quiet. My car's feeble air conditioning couldn't mask the stifling heat, and I couldn't afford to open the car door frequently. With a grim determination, I scoured the front yard of her house for a suitable spot. My eyes locked onto the tallest bush along the walkway leading to her front door. It seemed like the only cover that would shield me from prying eyes. I glanced both ways, unzipped my pants, and let loose a torrent of pent-up relief. The sound was off, though, not the expected splattering onto leaves and soil but something more akin to liquid hitting a solid surface. Panic surged through me as I tried to adjust my aim, thinking I had misjudged my target. But just as I was about to adjust my position, a voice, deep and sinister, sliced through the night air. What the heck? My heart leapt into my throat. Before I could react, a figure exploded from the bushes, charging past me, its body brushing against my stream, the force of my urine sending an involuntary spray onto the intruder. I heard a disgusted, guttural sound like someone spitting vehemently. My mind was in a frenzy as I watched the shadowy figure flee, disappearing into the night. I couldn't see where they went, but I did hear the screeching tires of a car in the distance. I stood there, my heart pounding like a drum, my body frozen in fear. I hadn't seen the person's face, but the encounter was terrifying enough to keep me rooted in place. My fight or flight response was on the fritz, and I had no idea how to react. A million thoughts raced through my mind, none of them making sense. I tried to rationalize the situation, my trembling hands still clutching my unzipped pants. Could these bushes lead to some backyard area and just look like they were against the house? I wondered aloud. Could they have been obscuring an open window? My voice betrayed my desperation, clinging to a thread of hope that this had all been a misunderstanding. But the sinister truth hung in the air, taunting me with its palpable malevolence. But then, as if defying my feeble attempts to dismiss the horror, I heard a rustling behind me, where the mysterious figure had vanished. My stomach dropped, and my skin turned to ice. It was a sound that could only be made by someone or something moving through the bushes. In that paralyzing moment, I knew that the only option was to flee. My instinct screamed at me to run, to get as far away from that house as possible. I couldn't explain what had just happened, but I knew it was dangerous and otherworldly. I bolted back to my car, my heart pounding louder than ever. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the pedal to the floor, and sped away. I didn't care about the speed limit, I needed distance between myself and that house, that night, and whatever lurked in the shadows. I didn't stop until I reached a nearby 24-hour drugstore. My car idled in the empty parking lot as I tried to regain my composure. I had to catch my breath and figure out what to do next. The fear was still coursing through my veins, my mind racing to make sense of the inexplicable encounter. I realized that I shouldn't be driving in my current state of shock and distress. It was then that I decided to call for help. With trembling hands, I dialed 911. Recounting the bizarre incident to the operator. The dispatcher's voice offered a lifeline of reassurance, promising that help was on the way. I repeated over and over that they needed to arrive before the customer, that there was something terribly wrong at that house. But my words tumbled out in a frantic jumble, my panicked mind unable to form coherent sentences. "You've got to save this girl because he wasn't after me," I stammered. "I was just delivering a pizza. Unless they were after me, in which case there might not be a girl, but I talked to one on the phone, so then you should find that girl because they used her to lure me there. But if she's real, she doesn't know about the guy, who is also real, and there could be more guys if there's actually a girl, and you know what? Even if there isn't a girl, there might actually be more guys. I only checked one part of the bushes, so I don't actually know. But we'll know which guy is the one I saw because I pissed all over him, you know. I didn't mean to. This was back when I thought the girl was real but not home, but she might be real, so you really need to find her if she is because the guy was real." The dispatcher wisely cut me off, requesting that I stop talking and remain on the line. I complied, my hands trembling as I clutched the phone, my gaze darting anxiously around the empty parking lot. But then, a notification on my phone startled me. An incoming call from the customer. I couldn't answer it without disconnecting from 911, so I ignored the call, my fear intensifying with each passing moment. A text message from the customer followed. "Hey, I'm here, don't see you?" she wrote. I relayed the information to 911, explaining that the customer had arrived. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on their way and instructed me to wait at a designated location for their arrival. However, an overwhelming sense of guilt washed over me. What if the customer was in danger? What if she had unwittingly walked into a perilous situation? The guilt gnawed at me, and I knew I had to do something. I muted my call with 911 and made a swift decision. I couldn't abandon the customer to the unknown horrors of that house. What if the danger had escalated since my departure? With trepidation, I turned back toward the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I whispered to myself, "Get in. Get in." As I inched closer, my senses on high alert. I saw her silhouette, a lone figure amidst the parked cars in the street, searching for her expected delivery person. I waved my headlights in her direction, a silent plea for her to approach. She skipped over, her demeanor cheerful and trusting, as though she had no inkling of the terror that had unfolded moments ago. I could hardly believe it. I kept my voice hushed but urgent, "Get in. Get in." She misinterpreted my urgency, thinking it was about the pizza. "Get it? Huh? Oh. You want me to get the pizza from the back?" I didn't want to frighten her further with the nightmarish ordeal I had just experienced, so I opted for a concise explanation. "There was a man in your bushes," I said tersely. "I'm on the phone with the police. I don't know where he is right now. Please get in the car so we can lock the doors." She nodded, her eyes widening with understanding. She complied without further questions, entering my car. I held up my phone, displaying the ongoing call with 911 to reassure her. I didn't have to wait long before the police arrived, a cruiser pulling up beside my car. I stepped out, my legs still shaky from the earlier encounter, and explained everything I had witnessed to the officers. The customer, meanwhile, provided more detailed information about her own terrifying experiences. It turned out that she had been aware of her abusive ex-boyfriend, a man who had been stalking her relentlessly. The police swiftly initiated their investigation, handling the situation with the seriousness it deserved. The terror that had plagued this young woman was all too real. As the officers conducted their duties, I stood there, a mixture of relief and lingering fear coursing through my veins. The night had descended into a harrowing nightmare, a descent into madness I could never have foreseen. The encounter served as a grim reminder of the unpredictable dangers that lurked in the ordinary corners of our lives. It was a chilling experience that haunted my thoughts, leaving me forever changed by the horrors I had unwittingly stumbled upon. The mysteries of that night would never be fully unraveled, and the sinister presence that had lurked in the shadows would forever remain a specter in my memory. The terror of that night would never truly leave me, a reminder that in the darkest moments of life, evil could manifest in the most unexpected ways. As I reflect on that fateful night, I am left with a profound understanding that safety is a fragile illusion, easily shattered by the malevolent forces that may lurk in the hidden corners of our existence. The ordinary act of delivering a pizza had thrust me into a world of darkness and fear, an experience that would forever haunt my dreams and keep me vigilant in the face of the unknown. The night had grown darker, and the oppressive heat seemed to intensify, weighing on me like a suffocating shroud. With my delivery completed, I was finally free to tend to my aching bladder. I sped toward the nearest convenience store, my desperation growing with every passing moment. Inside the store, I hurried to the restroom, the relief of finally reaching my destination making my steps almost frantic. I pushed open the door, and as I stepped inside, a wave of horror washed over me. The restroom was a nightmarish scene, a place of chaos and decay. The tiles were cracked and stained, the flickering fluorescent lights casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. The sink was rusted, its faucet leaking a steady, irregular drip. The mirrors were shattered, their glass shards scattered across the filthy floor. But what drew my attention most was the message scrawled in crimson on the cracked and graffiti-covered mirror. It read, "They're watching." A shiver ran down my spine as I tried to make sense of the cryptic warning. Who were they, and why were they watching? The unsettling encounter at the apartment complex came rushing back to me, and a sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I quickly used the restroom, my anxiety mounting with each passing second. As I exited, I couldn't help but feel that something had shifted, that I had unwittingly stumbled into a dark and sinister web of mysteries that I couldn't escape. Back in my car, I pulled out my phone and began to search for any information about the young woman who had taken the pizza. It was an unusual compulsion, but something about her had unnerved me, and I needed to understand why. After some digging, I discovered that her name was Emily, and she had recently moved to town to start a new job. There were no red flags in her background, nothing that would explain the sense of unease I felt. She seemed like an ordinary person trying to make a living. But as I scrolled through her social media profiles, I stumbled upon something that sent a chill down my spine. Among her photos of friends and family, there was one that stood out, an old, sepia-toned photograph of the very apartment complex where I had made the delivery. It looked exactly the same as it did now, decades earlier. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a connection between Emily and the eerie, abandoned state of the apartment complex that night. It was as if she held some key to the mysteries that surrounded that place. But what could it be? My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to pay Emily a visit, hoping to get some answers. As I drove back to the apartment complex, the darkness seemed to close in around me, and the oppressive heat intensified, making the air feel thick and suffocating. When I arrived at the building where Emily lived, I was greeted by an unsettling sight. The entrance was now covered in a tangled web of police tape, and uniformed officers stood guard. I parked a short distance away and approached cautiously. I struck up a conversation with one of the officers, trying to glean any information about what had happened. He was tight-lipped, only revealing that there had been a disturbance in the building earlier that evening, and they were conducting an investigation. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that Emily's apartment might be at the center of this mystery. I asked the officer if I could speak with her, and after a brief consultation with his superior, he reluctantly agreed to take me up to her unit. The elevator ride was tense, the air heavy with unspoken questions. When we reached Emily's floor, the officer led me down a dimly lit hallway, and we stopped in front of her apartment. He knocked, but there was no answer. He tried the doorknob, and to our surprise, it was unlocked. We cautiously entered the apartment, and what we found inside was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, and personal belongings scattered haphazardly. But what caught my eye was the message scrawled in red on the living room wall. It read, "They're here." The officer immediately radioed for backup, his voice trembling with fear. We searched the apartment, but there was no sign of Emily. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a trail of eerie messages and unanswered questions. As the police conducted their investigation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled into a web of darkness and intrigue that went far beyond anything I could have imagined. Emily's connection to the apartment complex, the cryptic messages, and her sudden disappearance all pointed to something sinister lurking beneath the surface. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation into Emily's disappearance yielded no results. The apartment complex remained shrouded in an air of unease, its residents whispering about strange occurrences and shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. I couldn't let go of the mystery, and I began to delve deeper into the history of the building. It was then that I uncovered a series of disturbing events that had taken place there over the years: unexplained disappearances, reports of strange noises and apparitions, and rumors of a malevolent presence that haunted the complex. The more I uncovered, the more I became convinced that there was something supernatural at play, something that defied rational explanation. And at the center of it all was Emily, the enigmatic young woman who had ordered a pizza on that fateful night. I became obsessed with finding her, believing that she held the key to unraveling the mysteries that surrounded the apartment complex. I scoured her social media profiles, searching for any clue that might lead me to her whereabouts. One evening, as I combed through her photos, I noticed something that sent a shiver down my spine. In one of the pictures, taken at a local park, there was a shadowy figure lurking in the background, its presence obscured by the surrounding darkness. It was a silhouette that seemed to defy the laws of nature, a shapeless, ever-shifting mass that exuded an aura of malevolence. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was as if the darkness itself had taken form, and it was watching Emily. The more I examined the photograph, the more I became convinced that this shadowy figure was connected to her disappearance and the eerie events at the apartment complex. Determined to uncover the truth, I began to investigate the history of the park where the photograph was taken. It was an old, abandoned cemetery, its tombstones weathered and crumbling with age. As I delved deeper into its past, I discovered a chilling tale of curses, witchcraft, and unexplained phenomena. The cemetery had once been the final resting place of a notorious witch, rumored to possess dark powers that allowed her to communicate with the dead and manipulate the forces of nature. Legend had it that her spirit still lingered in the cemetery, exacting revenge on anyone who dared to disturb her eternal slumber. As I pieced together the puzzle, I couldn't help but wonder if Emily had unwittingly awakened the malevolent spirit of the witch, unleashing a supernatural force that sought to claim her soul. It seemed like the only explanation for the bizarre events that had unfolded. Determined to confront the darkness that had engulfed Emily's life, I returned to the apartment complex and began to explore its hidden corners and forgotten secrets. It was a journey that would lead me into the heart of darkness, where the line between the living and the dead blurred, and the true horror of the witch's curse was revealed. The apartment complex had once been the site of a secret coven, a group of witches who practiced their dark arts in the shadows of the night. Their rituals had summoned the spirit of the witch buried in the cemetery, binding her to the complex and unleashing her vengeful wrath on anyone who crossed her path. As I delved deeper into the complex's history, I uncovered a series of journals and diaries that chronicled the coven's activities. They spoke of sacrifices, dark ceremonies, and the growing malevolence of the witch's spirit. It was a chilling record of a descent into madness and darkness. Armed with this newfound knowledge, I embarked on a perilous journey to confront the witch's spirit and rescue Emily from her clutches. I ventured into the heart of the abandoned cemetery, armed with a talisman I had acquired from an old, reclusive occultist. The night was pitch black, the air thick with an otherworldly chill. The tombstones loomed like silent sentinels, their shadows dancing in the flickering light of my flashlight. I could feel the presence of the witch's spirit all around me, a malevolent force that seemed to seep from the very earth itself. As I reached the center of the cemetery, I began to chant the incantation I had learned from the occultist, holding the talisman aloft. The air crackled with energy, and a sense of impending doom hung in the air. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, and the earth itself seemed to come alive. The tombstones shifted, their inscriptions twisting and distorting, and from the darkness emerged the spectral form of the witch herself. She was a horrifying sight, her form constantly shifting and changing, her eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. Her laughter echoed in the night, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You dare to challenge me?" she hissed, her voice a chilling whisper. "You are nothing, a mere mortal in the presence of true power." I held the talisman tightly, its light banishing the darkness that clung to the witch. With every word of the incantation, her form wavered and flickered, her power weakening. But the witch was not so easily defeated. With a final, desperate surge of energy, she lashed out at me, her spectral form colliding with mine. I felt a searing pain, as if my very soul were being torn apart. As the darkness closed in around me, I knew that I had to make a choice, a sacrifice. With every ounce of strength left in me, I chanted the final words of the incantation, and the talisman unleashed a blinding burst of light that consumed the witch's spirit. The darkness retreated, and I found myself standing alone in the cemetery, the night silent and still. The curse had been broken, and Emily was free. But the cost of my victory had been high. I had been marked by the witch's malevolent spirit, forever changed by the encounter. As I walked away from the cemetery, I knew that I would never be the same, that the darkness would always be a part of me. And as I looked back at the apartment complex, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors lurked in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those who dared to seek the truth. The world was a far more terrifying place than I had ever imagined, and the darkness that had consumed Emily's life was just the beginning of a nightmare that had no end. It was a night that will forever haunt my dreams, a chilling journey into the depths of darkness that no amount of therapy or time could ever erase. It all began as just another routine pizza delivery, but what transpired that night would shatter my sense of security and plunge me into a nightmare that still grips my soul. The ominous clouds that blanketed the sky seemed to portend the horrors that awaited me that fateful evening. As a pizza delivery person, I'd seen my fair share of oddities and unsettling encounters on the job, but nothing could have prepared me for the malevolent forces that would soon descend upon my life. I remember it as if it were yesterday. It was a moonless night, the kind that swallows the world in inky blackness, leaving only the dim glow of distant streetlights to guide my way. My destination lay in a remote part of town, far from the bustling city center, a place that always gave me an eerie sense of isolation. The delivery instructions led me to a decrepit house at the end of a winding, unpaved road. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, and the tires themselves whispered a disconcerting symphony of dread. The only source of light was a solitary porch light that cast long, menacing shadows across the uneven path leading to the house. As I approached the porch, a bone-chilling sight greeted me. Halloween decorations adorned the porch, an eerie display that sent a shiver down my spine. Yet, what struck me as most unsettling was the Grim Reaper, sinister and skeletal. It sat in a rickety rocking chair, swaying with a malevolent rhythm. It was the middle of June, and the presence of these eerie decorations only deepened my unease. Summoning my courage, I knocked on the door. It was a door like any other, weathered and worn, but when it creaked open slowly without my having received an answer, dread coiled around my heart. I knocked again, more forcefully this time, hoping for any sign of life within. My third knock remained unanswered, and I was about to turn away when the door swung open a little further, as if beckoning me to enter. A perverse curiosity mingled with my growing unease as I hesitantly stepped over the threshold into the shadowy abyss. The interior of the house was cloaked in darkness, and the pungent scent of decay hung heavy in the air. It was an unsettling silence that greeted me, a silence that seemed to smother all sound and reason. I called out, announcing my arrival, but the only response was the haunting echo of my own voice. And then, from the inky void before me, a wheezing voice emerged, a voice that seemed to resonate from the depths of despair. "Hold on a second," it croaked, sending a shudder through my being. A dim light flickered to life, revealing a hunched figure standing before me. The man, if he could be called that, was a grotesque sight to behold. He stood no taller than 4 feet 11 inches to 5 feet, his frail form stooped with age and decrepitude. His haggard face bore a grin that revealed a nightmarish tableau of yellowish black teeth. The man's grin widened as he appraised me, his eyes dancing with a malevolent glee. "You're right on time," he wheezed, his voice a chilling whisper. My instinct screamed at me to flee, to leave this accursed place behind, but something held me captive. Perhaps it was the fear that I had somehow stumbled into a nightmare from which there was no waking. I recited the total, my voice trembling, and the man's response was a sinister chuckle that seemed to reverberate throughout the house. The amount was $17.20, and as I extended my hand to receive payment, his cold, bony fingers brushed against mine, sending a shiver up my spine. The old man, still grinning like a malevolent specter, asked if I could carry the pizzas inside to the kitchen. My skin crawled at the thought, but his frailty and vulnerability compelled me to agree. I had no way of knowing that this decision would lead me deeper into a nightmare I could never escape. We ventured further into the house, down dimly lit hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. Every step I took was met with a growing sense of foreboding, as if the very walls of the house were closing in around me. Finally, we arrived at the kitchen, where the only source of light was a flickering candle. The room was eerily immaculate, a stark contrast to the deteriorating exterior of the house. I couldn't help but wonder what horrors lay hidden beneath this facade of cleanliness. The old man, with a strange glint in his eye, requested that I wait in the hallway while he attempted to relight the kitchen's extinguished lights. As I stood there, the minutes dragged on, and the oppressive silence weighed upon me like a leaden shroud. Suddenly, a soft exhale broke the silence, followed by the extinguishing of the candle's flame. I called out to the old man, my voice trembling, but received no response. The darkness enveloped me, and panic surged through my veins as I fumbled for my phone, desperately searching for its feeble flashlight. The room was plunged into an inky abyss, and my heart pounded in my chest as I tried to regain my composure. The realization that I was alone in this nightmarish place, shrouded in darkness, sent a chill down my spine. Then, like a whisper from the abyss, I heard the sound of a jar being opened, followed by the ominous click of a lighter. The candle's flame danced back to life, revealing the old man standing before me, holding a pickle jar in his trembling hands. His grin had widened further, and his eyes gleamed with a malevolent fervor. "This is Marjorie," he whispered, cradling the jar as if it were a cherished relic. "She isn't supposed to be awake right now, but since we have a guest who brought food, it is okay." My mind reeled, unable to process the surreal horror that unfolded before my eyes. I watched in silent terror as the old man handed me a pickle and instructed me to put her next to the pizza box. My trembling hand accepted the pickle, and I did as he commanded, placing it next to the pizza box on the floor. The room seemed to close in around me as I carried out this surreal request, my mind struggling to comprehend the grotesque nightmare that had become my reality. With the task complete, the old man paid me, and I seized the opportunity to escape the nightmarish tableau that had unfolded before me. I turned and bolted from the house, my heart pounding, my lungs gasping for air. Back at the pizza shop, I hastily recounted my bizarre and terrifying encounter to my bewildered coworkers. They listened with a mixture of disbelief and horror, unsure of how to respond to my chilling tale. I informed my manager of the disturbing incident, and it was decided that I should file a police report. The authorities were notified, and I provided a detailed description of the old man and the location of the house. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me like a suffocating fog. Nightmares plagued my sleep, each one a vivid reimagining of the horrors I had witnessed in that accursed house. Then, one evening, as I returned to my own home, I was confronted with a sight that sent a fresh wave of terror coursing through my veins. On the door of my house, in bold, crimson strokes, was the unmistakable symbol of a star of Satan. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the sinister emblem, a grim reminder of the malevolent forces that lurked in the shadows. I knew then that I was not free from the horrors of that night, that they had followed me home, and that they would continue to haunt my every waking moment. My life spiraled into a never-ending cycle of fear and paranoia. I couldn't sleep during the night, my mind tortured by the chilling memories of that nightmarish encounter. Every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking threat, and every creak of the house sent my heart racing. I became a prisoner of my own terror, unable to escape the suffocating grip of fear that held me captive. I lived in constant dread, waiting for some malevolent force to descend upon me, to carry me away into the abyss from which there was no return. And so, my life became a never-ending nightmare, a descent into madness from which I could find no escape. The horrors of that night, the worshippers of Satan, the malevolent grin of the old man, they all continued to haunt me, a relentless reminder of the darkness that had forever altered the course of my existence. To this day, I wait for the next bad thing to happen, for the shadows to come alive with malevolence once more. I am trapped in a perpetual state of terror, unable to escape the horrors that have consumed my life, and I fear that I will never find peace again. For in the heart of darkness, there are nightmares that can never be forgotten, and horrors that can never be escaped.